Mira stood beside her old van on the side of a long empty road while the late sun warmed the metal, and the land stretched wide and quiet around her. The engine had made a sharp, unhappy sound, and she trusted that sound because the van had been her home for years and she knew when it needed care. She rolled up her sleeves and leaned forward with a small tool in her hand, while grease marked her fingers and dust clung to her boots. The air felt still and patient, and the only noise came from the soft wind and the cooling engine. Mira liked moments like this because no one asked questions and no one watched her closely, and she could exist without explaining her past. She had learned long ago that quiet places were safer than crowded ones, and broken machines were easier to fix than broken lives. The van carried everything she owned, including clothes, tools, food, and a box of old papers she rarely opened. She had no house and no town to return to, and she preferred movement because staying too long in one place made memories rise. Her life moved forward in careful steps, and she planned only as far as the next sunrise. As she reached deeper under the hood, her sleeve slipped and revealed a faded tattoo on her arm that looked simple to anyone who noticed it. The lines were worn but steady, and the shape carried meaning known by very few. Mira pulled her sleeve back down out of habit, because habit stayed even when fear faded. She tightened a bolt and wiped her hands when she felt a faint vibration under her feet. At first it sounded like distant thunder, but the sky was clear and open. The vibration grew stronger, and the wind carried a low rumble that made her straighten slowly. Mira closed the hood and stood beside the van as a line of dark vehicles appeared far down the road. They moved with purpose and order, and dust rose behind them like a trailing cloud. She sighed quietly because trouble often found her when she least wanted it. The vehicles slowed and stopped in neat formation not far from her van. Doors opened and uniformed soldiers stepped out with sharp movements and alert eyes. They spread out smoothly and scanned the area while boots met the ground in steady rhythm. Mira kept her hands visible and her posture calm because calm often guided moments like this. She had learned that panic invited questions and silence invited patience. From the center vehicle, a tall older man stepped out last with careful steps and straight posture. His uniform was clean and his face carried the weight of long command and long memory. This was General Hale, and his presence changed the air around them. He looked at the van, then at Mira, and his eyes paused as if something felt familiar. Mira met his gaze without challenge and without greeting. The general took a few steps closer, and his eyes moved from her hands to her face and then to her arm. Her sleeve had slipped again, and the faded tattoo rested in open light. The general stopped moving, and the world felt suddenly smaller. His expression shifted from routine focus to sharp recognition and then to deep respect. Without a word, he raised his hand and saluted. The soldiers around him froze in confusion but followed his lead at once. A full line of salutes formed facing a woman in worn clothes beside a broken van. Mira felt her chest tighten as memories pressed close, but she did not move. She had hoped never to see that reaction again, and not on an open road under a wide sky. The general lowered his hand slowly and stepped closer with his voice kept low. "Where did you get that mark?" he asked with steady tone and careful breath. Mira pushed her sleeve higher and let the symbol show clearly. "I earned it," she said in a quiet voice that carried no pride and no regret. The general nodded once, as if confirming a truth he had long suspected. "You were listed as missing," he said with a trace of disbelief. She gave a small tired smile and said that was the plan. Silence settled between them while dust moved across the road. The general looked at his soldiers and ordered them to stand down. Weapons lowered and tension eased, though curiosity burned in every glance. One soldier was directed to help with the van, and he moved carefully, as if approaching a story from a book. Mira allowed the help and watched the work with calm focus. The general remained nearby and spoke again in a softer voice. "I never thought I would see one of you again," he said. "Most of us are gone," Mira replied without looking up. The general nodded, and his shoulders seemed heavier. He spoke of an operation from years ago, and Mira listened without comment. She remembered cold nights, strict silence, and choices made under pressure. She remembered orders that could not be questioned, and missions that could not be named. She remembered the cost that followed, and the quiet that came after. The engine sound smoothed, and the van felt steady again. Mira closed the hood and wiped her hands clean. She looked at the general and saw respect mixed with regret. "Things are changing," he said carefully. "Not enough," she replied with steady eyes. She climbed into the van and started the engine. Before she drove away, the general spoke once more and offered help if she ever needed it. Mira paused and looked back and said she learned long ago who showed up when it mattered. She drove onto the road and the van disappeared into the dust. The general stood still watching the empty stretch ahead. He knew the past had not stayed buried. He also knew that the woman beside the van carried more truth than any report he had ever read. Mira drove through the fading light with the road stretching ahead like a quiet promise and the van humming steadily beneath her hands. The encounter stayed with her even as distance grew and dust settled behind her. She had thought those days were buried deep and sealed away by time and silence. Yet one look from the general had unlocked memories she worked hard to keep still. She kept her eyes forward and focused on the road because looking back had never helped her move on. As the sky darkened, she pulled off near a small empty field and parked the van beside a line of low trees. She preferred places where no one asked questions and no one stayed long. She prepared a simple meal and sat on the back step of the van while the night air cooled her skin. The stars appeared slowly one by one and reminded her how wide the world still was. She breathed deeply and tried to settle her thoughts. Her mind drifted back to the time before the road, before the van, and before the quiet life she now lived. She remembered a younger version of herself standing in a clean uniform with strong posture and steady hands. She had been chosen for her calm nature, her sharp focus, and her ability to follow through when others hesitated. Training had been hard and endless, but she never complained. She believed in purpose and believed that service mattered. The unit she joined had no name spoken aloud and no public record. Members were taught to disappear into any place and solve problems before they grew. They worked in silence and left no trace behind. Mira had learned how to move unseen, how to listen carefully, and how to decide quickly. She had learned how trust worked in small teams and how betrayal often came from far above. One mission changed everything for her. It had started like many others with simple instructions and limited information. The land was unfamiliar and the stakes were high, though never fully explained. Her team followed orders and completed the task as directed. But when things went wrong, the response never came. They waited for support that never arrived and signals that stayed silent. Mira remembered the moment she realized they had been left behind. She remembered the look in her team members' eyes when truth settled in. There was no anger at first, only focus and resolve. They worked together to get out and protect each other. Not everyone made it back. The cost was heavy, and the silence afterward felt worse than the danger itself. When she returned, she was met with closed doors and quiet avoidance. Reports were altered and names were removed. The unit was dissolved without ceremony, and members were told to move on quietly. Mira accepted it outwardly, but inside something broke. She understood then that loyalty was one-sided and truth was often inconvenient. That was when she left. She gave back what she could and kept only what she earned. The tattoo on her arm was not decoration but a reminder of what had been real. It marked her as someone who had stood when others stepped away. She chose a life without orders and without expectations. She chose the road because it did not lie to her. Now sitting beside her van, she looked at the symbol on her arm and traced its edges slowly. She had hidden it not out of shame but out of peace. She wanted no more salutes, no more recognition, and no more memories stirred by chance encounters. Yet the world had a way of circling back. The next morning she drove toward a small town for supplies. She kept her head down and her movements simple. She noticed a few people watching the van, but no one approached. She preferred it that way. She gathered food, water, and fuel and returned to the road without delay. As she left town, she noticed a familiar vehicle far behind her. It kept distance but followed steadily. Mira stayed calm and maintained her speed. She had learned to notice patterns, and this one felt intentional. The vehicle did not rush or retreat. It stayed patient. After several miles, the vehicle slowed and turned off another road. Mira released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. She reminded herself that not every shadow held threat and not every past step followed into the present. Still she stayed alert and trusted her instincts. That night she parked near a river and listened to water move steadily through the dark. The sound helped ground her thoughts. She realized that the general had not followed her to control her or question her. He had followed because he remembered something that still mattered. That recognition did not threaten her freedom. It simply reminded her that her actions once meant something. Mira lay back inside the van and stared at the ceiling. She knew her life might never fully escape the past, but it did not have to be ruled by it. She could choose where to go and how long to stay. She could decide when to speak and when to remain silent. As sleep finally came, she accepted one quiet truth. The tattoo was not just a mark of what she survived, but a symbol of what she carried forward. Strength, patience, and the will to keep moving. The road ahead was still hers. Mira woke before sunrise with the soft light touching the edge of the river, and the van resting quietly beside her. The night had been calm, but her dreams were restless and filled with old paths and silent faces. She sat up slowly and listened to the world around her until her breathing matched its pace. She reminded herself that today was just another day on the road and that the past did not control her direction. She washed her face with cool water and prepared to move before the town nearby came fully awake. The van started without trouble, and that small success gave her comfort. As she drove, she thought about the general and the look in his eyes that held respect mixed with weight. It was a look she had seen before on leaders who understood cost but could not change it. She wondered if he would speak to others about her, or if he would keep the memory to himself. By midday she reached a wide stretch of road lined with open fields and scattered buildings. She decided to stop for rest and parked near an old service station that no longer served travelers. The place was quiet and the walls were marked by time and weather. Mira liked places like this because they held stories without demanding attention. She stepped out of the van and stretched her arms while the wind moved gently across the land. As she worked on small repairs, she noticed a young man watching from a distance. He stood near the edge of the building and seemed unsure whether to approach. Mira stayed calm and continued her task because she believed in letting moments reveal themselves. After a while, the young man stepped closer and greeted her politely. He asked if she needed help, and she thanked him but said she was fine. They spoke briefly, and he mentioned that the area had seen more official movement recently. He spoke of inspections and changes that made people uneasy. Mira listened carefully and nodded without sharing her thoughts. She had learned that information flowed freely when questions stayed simple. The young man soon left and Mira returned to her work. As the afternoon passed, she felt a sense of quiet purpose settle in. She realized that despite her efforts to stay distant, she still carried a role beyond survival. People she met felt drawn to her calm and clarity. She did not lead them, but she influenced the space she occupied. This understanding did not frighten her, but it reminded her to stay mindful. Later that day she drove toward higher ground where the road curved through hills. The view opened wide and the sky seemed closer. Mira felt a sense of balance return as movement steadied her thoughts. She remembered times when decisions had been rushed and lives depended on quick action. Those skills had never left her, and she knew they never would. As evening approached, she noticed another vehicle pulled off the road ahead. It appeared disabled, and smoke rose lightly from its hood. Mira slowed and considered her options. She could pass by and continue without delay. She could also stop and offer help, knowing that risk came with choice. After a moment she pulled over because she believed that strength meant knowing when to act. The vehicle belonged to an older couple who looked worried and tired. Mira approached calmly and asked about the problem. She listened and assessed the situation with trained ease. She offered help and soon had the issue identified. Her movements were steady and confident, and the couple watched with relief. As she worked, the man noticed the tattoo on her arm and paused. He did not recognize it, but he sensed its weight. He said nothing, and Mira appreciated his restraint. When the engine started again, the couple thanked her warmly and offered food and rest. Mira declined kindly and wished them safe travel. She returned to her van with a quiet sense of purpose renewed. Helping others reminded her that her past had shaped her, not broken her. She did not need recognition or rank to make a difference. She needed only to choose her actions carefully. That night she parked on a ridge overlooking distant lights. The world below felt busy and uncertain, but her place felt steady. She sat inside the van and wrote a few notes in an old book she kept hidden. She wrote not to remember pain but to honor clarity. She thought again of the general and realized that some leaders carried regret because they remembered those who paid the highest cost. She hoped he would speak truth where he could and stay silent where needed. She knew that change came slowly, but honesty planted seeds. As the night grew quiet, Mira rested with a calm heart. She accepted that her life would continue to cross paths with others shaped by the same system. She did not fear these meetings anymore. She trusted herself to handle what came. Before sleep she looked at the tattoo once more and felt no weight from it. It no longer bound her to a past role. It simply marked a chapter that shaped her strength. The road ahead remained open, and she was ready to meet it. Mira woke before dawn with a steady sense of calm, and the van resting quietly beneath the open sky. The night had been peaceful, and the distant lights she saw earlier now felt far away and unimportant. She sat still for a moment and listened to the soft sounds of morning as the world slowly prepared to move again. She knew this day would carry change even if she could not yet name it. She drove as the sun rose and painted the hills with soft color, and the road curved gently ahead. With every mile she felt lighter, as if the weight of memory had shifted into something useful. She no longer felt chased by her past or pulled back by it. Instead it traveled with her like a quiet companion. By midday she reached a wide open crossing where several roads met and signs pointed toward distant towns. She slowed and parked near a small rest area with a few benches and a water pump. Travelers passed through without stopping, and no one paid her much attention. Mira stepped out and stretched and felt the warmth of the day settle into her bones. As she rested, she noticed a group of workers nearby repairing a broken fence along the road. They moved slowly and seemed unsure of their plan. Mira watched for a moment and saw the hesitation in their steps. Without thinking too much, she walked over and offered a simple suggestion. Her words were clear and calm, and the group listened. Soon the work moved more smoothly and the tension eased. One of the workers thanked her and said she had a way of making things clearer. Mira smiled gently and said that sometimes a fresh view helped. She did not stay long and returned to her van knowing she had left something useful behind. These moments mattered to her more than any title ever had. As the afternoon passed, she drove toward a quiet stretch of land where the road narrowed and trees lined the edges. The air felt different there and carried the sense of something ending and something beginning. Mira slowed and decided to stop for the night early. She parked near a clearing and prepared her space with practiced ease. While she rested, she thought about the many lives she had crossed since leaving her old world behind. Some encounters were brief and others left deeper marks. Each one had taught her something about herself. She realized she had been living not to escape the past, but to redefine what strength looked like. Later that evening she noticed headlights approaching, and she remained calm as the vehicle slowed and stopped nearby. A single person stepped out and approached slowly with open posture. It was the general from the road, and his presence felt different this time. He carried no authority in his stance, only respect. He greeted her politely and asked if he could speak for a moment. Mira nodded and listened as he explained that he had thought long about their meeting. He spoke of records that needed correction and stories that deserved truth. He did not ask her to return or to serve again. He only thanked her for what she had done and for what she had endured. Mira listened quietly and felt no anger rise within her. She told him that acknowledgement mattered, but freedom mattered more. She said that truth should be carried forward with care, not used for display. The general agreed and said he would do what he could. Before leaving he saluted once more, but this time it felt different. It was not a command or a symbol of rank. It was a gesture of respect between equals. Mira accepted it with a simple nod. After he left, the night felt calm and complete. Mira sat inside the van and looked at the road ahead through the windshield. She felt no need to rush and no need to hide. Her life had found balance between memory and motion. As sleep came, she understood that her story was not one of disappearance but of choice. She had chosen to live with purpose beyond structure and to carry strength without display. The tattoo on her arm was no longer a secret or a burden. It was simply part of her story. When morning arrived, she started the van and drove forward with steady hands and clear mind. The road welcomed her as it always had, and the future remained open. Mira smiled softly, knowing she belonged not to any past system but to herself and the path she chose to follow.